All right, everybody. Welcome to the UC Master Gardeners of Santa Clara talk on Let's Have Some Fun Growing Garlic, Ginger, Chives, and Turmeric. Our Master Gardener speaker is Dee Brown. I recommend that you put your Zoom on speaker view, video off, microphone off. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll have breaks throughout so that I can ask Dee your questions. And Dee, if you want to begin.
Hi, good evening. It's good to have you here. And at least you're not outside in the smoke. So that's a good thing. So, my goal tonight is just to give you some basics. I'm not an expert. I do know some things and I know where to find some information. And we'll be sharing that with you also in the chat. So, my goal tonight is just to go over these four plants that are edible and they're kind of interesting and to just give you confidence in how to plant them, both indoors and outdoors, and then where to go if you've got some questions. So let's go right ahead then. So this is do it yourself. We don't need the store. We can just do it right here in our own homes. Whether you have an apartment or you have an outdoors or a patio, it's possible to plant any of these foods for yourself. This is going to look silly, but the soil and sun is important. It's vitally important. And then we'll talk about how you plant. There are certain techniques or needs that individual plants have. We're going to talk about watering and augmenting their nutrition with fertilizer. And then for outdoor weeds and how to control them. Some plants are more competitive with weeds than others. Some it doesn't bother so much, and others, like garlic, it bothers a lot. IPM stands for Integrated Pest Management. And it's really what do you do if somebody else is trying to get in on your food? And then our last part will be when and how to harvest and how to cure it, especially with the garlic. So that's our overview. I'm going to start off with something rather boring. This picture isn't the greatest, but it hopefully will stick in your mind. It says, "What soil?" And I'm going to make a big deal out of this because there's a vast difference between soil, which is alive and is full of organic matter and organic life, and dirt, which is dead, lacking those things. Your plant needs to be in a soil, not in dirt. So let's go on to the next slide. And this is going to further, just a couple real quick slides are just going to give us a view of what's in soil. So there's both macroscopic life, the things you can see with the naked eye. You can see we have an earthworm here. We have some sow bugs. There could be pincher bugs, earwigs, a lot of beetles, spiders, of course. So, and many other things that you've seen when you're in your garden. That life is not going to be there, and it's not going to be there abundantly unless it has something to eat. So a soil that is alive has food, both for macroscopic life and also for microscopic life, and hence for your plant. And we're going to see that there's a very integral connection between all of those. So on the next slide, we're just going to see a couple of things, largely with electron microscopes. And this is actually looking at organisms that are in the soil. And before we look at them closely, I just want to say something. The nutrients in the soil are not able to be accessed directly by the plant. The plant has a go-between. And the go-between are going to be fungi, which are mycorrhizae, the microscopic fungi. And it's going to be bacteria and protozoa and some other nematodes, this sort of thing, that are microscopic. These are the organisms that actually fetch or get the nutrients from the soil, and then they deliver it or make it available to the plant so that it can ingest it and take it up through its roots. That would also include bacteria. To me, this was rocket science when I first heard this about 10 years ago, but it's when I dwell on it, it helps me understand how important soil is. versus dirt. So it's the foundation, it's alive, and it's what's going to give life to your plant and allow your plant to thrive. So in the top one, this is a picture of bacteria on a root hair. The root hair itself, which comes from the root, is microscopic. And then we have the bacteria, and you can see how small they are. They only live about 24 hours, but they're prolific in the soil, and they have a lot to do with releasing those nutrients to the plant. And the mycorrhizae that we see here, which is a microscopic fungi, is actually penetrated inside the root of a plant. And it's not harming it. It's actually, I guess it's like a hypodermic needle. This is how it's going to deliver nutrients to the plant, by piercing through the root hair. So let's go on to the next one. This one's kind of a little bit of a wild picture, but I love it because it's got some great color to it. But this is a root hair, the yellowy gold thing that we see here. And then the mycorrhizae, these little teeny thin wild filaments, are these fungi that are actually piercing that root hair, and they're delivering nutrients to that plant. Okay, so here we have a lovely pyramid, and I don't want you to study this extensively. This is a way that soil scientists have visualized the different types of soil. And then they also identify the sweet spot, or the soil that we're looking for in most cases for most of the plants that we want to grow. So basically, there are three categories of minerals that make up soil. There's clay, which is extremely, extremely small. There's silt, which is bigger than clay. And then there's sand, which is quite a bit bigger. And those three, in different proportions, make different types of soil. So you can have pure clay, pure silt, pure sand. Practically nothing grows in pure any of those. But you'll find that plants, and certain types of plants, will prefer certain types of soils or combination of ingredients. And what we're looking for is kind of a loamy, and loam is when you have about 40% sand, 40% clay, and then you have about 20% silt. And this is a soil that has air pockets in it, so the air can move around, the water can move around. It's also so the microorganisms can move around, and so that the roots can move in the soil well. So it's just a good environment for your plant, and that's what we're going to be looking for soil. And next slide. Okay, another very interesting chart. This takes me back to high school, but I think this is worth taking a quick look at. We have the primary nutrients that a plant requires, and I think we're all familiar with NPK, nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, and potassium. And these are the yellow ones. But there are secondary nutrients that are also needed by plants. So I think I can read them pretty well. There's magnesium, calcium, sulfur. These are our blue ones. And then with the red are our micronutrients. And just like for people and animals, these are the things that we need, but not in great quantities. So we've got copper, chlorine, boron, nickel, iron, magnesium. And then the one that's my very favorite that I can hardly say, I said it earlier today, molybdenum. I think that's wrong, but you can play with it. Also magnesium, and what's this one? Oh, we always say calcium. So this just gives you an idea that, it's not just three things that your plant needs in order to grow well for you. Next slide. Oh, excuse me, let's go back. I'm sorry. And importantly, I never thought about this until it was pointed out to me, but hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen, these are things that your plant receives from the air. And so your soil has to also be able to let these gases in and let these gases out. That's why our soil is very important. Okay, let's go on to the next one. So basically, as master gardeners, what we want to do is help you be successful. and to have some fun in the process of growing plants. So if you think about your soil as an organism, then just be careful with it. Think about it. We'd suggest that you use organic fertilizers. It's going to be good because it doesn't make a big carbon footprint. It's natural. It's not made from petrochemicals. And it's probably going to be better for your plant. Some fertilizers can actually burn your plant's roots, especially if they're not in the right quantity. And the microorganisms that we were looking at earlier, what they eat, they're not eating the plants. Some of them eat each other, but most of the ones, the protozoa and the bacteria and the fungi, they're actually eating organic matter. And all that are things that are dead that have broken down. So it's leaves that have broken down to their natural state. It's going to be dead bugs. It's going to be dead grass. It's going to be dead flowers that have broken down. And those that is the food for those microorganisms. So when we talk about your soil, and especially for the plants that we're going to talk about tonight, when you put organic matter in there, you're feeding those organisms. And so they're just going to be more prolific and they're going to do a better job for your plant. Okay, and then just for with the topic of fertilizing, just use what your plant needs. You don't need to be attacking it with a lot of fertilizers. And there's a schedule for these plants that we're going to talk about that works best for them to have their some of their nutrients restored to them by fertilizing them. But it doesn't have to be an always kind of thing. Was there a question? Was there a question, Jill?
Yes, we do have a question. Somebody asked, did you say sandy loam is in the soil?
And say that's a type of soil, right? Yeah, and so it has more sand in it. And the loam is the combination of the three, the clay, the sand, and the silt. And so when we say sandy loam, it means it has a higher percentage of sand. If we say clay loam, more clay, or silt loam, it has more silt. It's not for you to memorize, and you can find that information on the web, and it is interesting, but it's just a way to chart it. And then, of course, there are certain plants that will grow in a lot of those, but there are some plants that will not do well in some. And this is something that people need to know when they're going to plant. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Okay. So it goes without saying, but if we don't say it, then maybe we'll forget about it. Sunlight is the engine that powers your plants. That's the energy. So they require an alive soil, but it requires sunlight. And the sunlight is what the chlorophyll is going to be working with to turn into the energy for the plant, for it to grow roots, to grow leaves, to grow rhizomes, and to grow fruit or seeds. So adequate sunlight means that your plant is going to do well. Not all plants need the same amount of sunlight. And then depending on the age of the plant, they'll be more susceptible to being sunburned or having sun distress. And I think about it like children. No one would take an infant and sit them out in the sun, even morning sun, for 1 or 2 hours without sunscreen on, right? Or some shade. So your plants are like that when they're young also. And we call that hardening off. When they've been indoors or they've been growing in a shade house or under an eave and they haven't been in the direct sun and the leaves are tender, we want to be sure that we just don't throw them outside in the hot sun like we've been having recently, because they'll get sunburned. They've got to kind of work up to it. And then some plants can take a lot of sun, like maybe 12, 15 hours of sunlight a day if there's that much. And other plants can't take as much direct sunlight. And some can thrive and do really well and even less direct sun. Some grow well in dappled shade or even in shade. So knowing that's going to help you just have a plant that's going to be the best that it can be if you've got the right growing conditions for it. So it's interesting because ginger is an understory plant that grows in the jungles. So the light that it receives it is dappled light oftentimes. So it's not direct sunlight. So it will do well as a house plant, and it can do well like under a tree where it gets some sunlight each day, but not, full sun, but not really deep shade either. So it kind of is an in-between plant. And then chives and garlic, they need more light and they like the direct sunlight, and they actually have even tougher stalks after the shoots come up. So they can tolerate it better. Yeah. Yes. Good question about ginger and turmeric. Turmeric. Yeah, they're rhizomes. And we'll talk a little bit more about rhizomes. I think it's really interesting. Okay, so sunlight. We need to consider the sun. And let's start off with ginger. You can plant it anytime indoors. You can plant it outside in the spring or in the fall. Now would be a good time to plant it outside. And this is just a bit of information, and maybe you've heard it before, but there's something called the plant hardiness zones. And you can just search for that on the internet. You could just put in San Jose plant hardiness zone, and it will come up for San Jose with the numbers 9 to 12. So in the city limits of San Jose, we have several zones, and all it's talking about is that what temperature in that zone, what are the lowest temperatures I can expect in the wintertime? It tells you what the lowest temperature is. So we can see some of the examples here. So we don't have a problem with ginger growing it outside in our city limits, and probably the towns around here, Campbell and Sunnyvale and whatnot. But you can search your own city, and especially Los Altos, you can search it and see what plant hardiness zone comes up. But so if it's too cool for your plant, then you're not going to plant it in the fall. You're going to plant it in the spring when it's not going to have a danger of frost. But we live in a temperate area here, so we get to do a lot of things that people in different parts of the country don't get to do when they have freezing temperatures. Okay. Let's just take a breath. So I need to say this because I'm sure that many of you are more familiar with ginger than I am. Actually, I did not grow up in a household where ginger was a common food. And I only thing I knew about were ginger snaps until I was in college. And then I found out there were other things you could do with ginger, like stir fry and use it pickled with sushi and whatnot. So, and I know there are a lot of other things. So if your culture or your cooking experience has a lot of ginger in it, you're a lot more knowledgeable than I am in that area. So let's just kind of talk about the basics of ginger, and it's pretty simple. You're going to use, when you purchase it in the store, you're going to purchase a piece that is plump. And I have a piece here right now. I can show you if we can go to the screen. Can we do that? Is this showing it? Or did we want the full screen?
Yeah, it's on the full screen.
Is showing it? Okay. So here I have the background. I hope I'm doing it okay. But here we've got a piece of ginger, and it kind of looks like a hand to me, kind of a gnarly hand. And you're going to find that it has these buds on it. Here's a bud. It's kind of like a little button. Another one right here sticking out. I've got this one sticking out, so that makes 4. I've got another one here that makes 5. So I've kept it. I purchased one that was plump to begin with, that was hydrated. So it had been picked and washed and shipped off to the store. I don't want something that's wrinkled and dried out because it's stressed. And you want to get your money's worth. So if you happen to have some ginger around the house and you want to try to rehydrate it, oftentimes you can just soak it in a bowl of water for 24 hours, and it will actually absorb some water and it'll give it a boost. You can also store it like in a paper towel inside the refrigerator something that breathes a little bit, or a tea towel, and store it in there for a bit, and it can rehydrate it. Yeah, and yes, ginger from the store is okay. Um, you can buy organic, but um, it's said that some places or some producers of ginger will put a retardant to keep it from budding. But actually, this is not organic ginger, and I've been using non-organic for a while now to plant, and I've had no problem with it growing. So I suspect that the retardant isn't put on here. It'd be another step for the manufacturer or for the producer. And probably they just get their ginger coming into the store and they keep it moist and it moves out. And so it's not necessary. So there might be exceptions, but that's what I know about it right now. Okay. So that's our ginger. And as long as we have it up here, let's talk about it. It's a rhizome. And what a rhizome is, it is actually an underground stem, and it grows horizontally. So if this is growing underground, it's going to be growing this way. Okay. The roots grow from the intersection of these little nubs, and they're going to grow down just like every other root that we know about grows. So they grow into the soil to get the nutrition in the water for the rhizome, and then to produce the sprouts and to produce the foliage. But this is a rhizome, and there are other plants that have underground stems. It's an adaptation. I don't know too much about why it's like that, but it's very interesting. So it doesn't grow like this. It grows horizontally, which is kind of funny. So it's a horizontal stem instead of a vertical stem, which is what we usually think about. So that can just make you smarter knowing that. Okay, so let's go back to the slides. Okay, so we're going to get our ginger and then break it into pieces. So usually for a piece that I had that's about half as big as my hand, and I noticed I had about 6 buds. So I'm probably going to break it into 3 pieces, and each piece would have 1 to 2 buds on it. And what you can do after you break it apart or cut it apart, but it breaks very easily. So I don't think you need to go through the trouble to cut it. It's a little hard. So breaking will probably be easier for you. And then just leave it on the counter for a day to let it callus over, to let that broken part kind of get some hard tissue on it. And that is just a barrier to pathogens. It's kind of like a scab. So we're just going to let it do that before you put it in the soil, just to give yourself a little bit of help from protecting it from pathogens. This is the part where the soil versus the dirt comes in. So for step 3, what's going to be really important to do is to put it into a quality potting soil. So let's say we're planting it in as a house plant. And a quality potting soil is one that's sterile and that it's moist, and that when you read the package, it's going to tell you how wonderful it is, but it's going to tell you some other things. It's going to tell you whether it has compost in it. It might say it has mycorrhizae in it. It might say it's good draining. In other words, you want a balanced potting soil, and you're not going to want to get a soil that's for cactus, let's say. You just want a good general potting soil, and it's going to be clean. So you're not going to have to worry about introducing any weeds or any pathogens when you do that. I am going to ask you to add something to it though, and it's called perlite. And perlite looks like, actually it looks like styrofoam, which is not to its credit, but it looks like little teeny beads of styrofoam like you'd find in bean bags. But perlite is a natural ingredient. It's a volcanic glass, and when it's subjected to heat, it kind of explodes into like a little teeny ball of popcorn that's white and looks like styrofoam, but it's not. It's organic. The thing that's wonderful about perlite is when you add about 20% of it to your potting mix, it does 2 things for you. It's going to help the water drain out of your soil well, and it's also going to keep air pockets open in the soil. And we talked about the gas exchange, about the hydrogen and the carbon and the oxygen that the soil needs. And actually, the soil, the first 7 inches of your soil will actually have a full exchange every 24 hours of those gases. So we want to have some airspace, and the perlite will really help us with that. A big old bag of it, like 1.5 cubic yards, doesn't cost much at all, and it doesn't weigh a thing. So you can carry it out to the car by yourself. It's going to last you a really long time. It's one of the best things that I've discovered. It's good for your cactus mixes. It's good for your succulent mixes. It's just very, very helpful. We're going to have some references that you can refer to from this talk. And then it's also being recorded, and I think we're going to have it on a YouTube channel. So you'll have some information, but not a handout per se. Okay, so we're going to take those pieces, and you want to put it in a pot, a container that's at least 2 times wider than the section of rhizome that you're adding. So a 2-inch rhizome, you're going to put it in like a 5-inch pot or a 6-inch pot. And it's just because when it starts to grow, it's going to grow horizontally. So we want it to have some room to grow. And then it's going to start growing roots to get the nutrition from the soil. And then it's going to start growing shoots, and it's going to grow the foliage. So, and then it's going to take it about, it's an average about 8 to 10 months before you get a good sized rhizome there that you can harvest. It's going to take it a couple of weeks for the shoots to show, but keeping it moist is super important, not having it soggy or drippy. It just wants to be moist. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and, you can see that it says fertilize monthly, and we're going to just augment with a good organic fertilizer. Fish emulsion or an aged chicken manure is good. And monthly would be fine to do it according to the instructions. We're feeding the root. So a 10, 20, 20. So we've got our nitrogen, our potassium, and our phosphorus, right? Nitrogen is what feeds most of the foliage on a plant. So you can see that what we're looking for here is we care about the foliage, but we care very much about the roots and the rhizomes. So that's why paying attention to the potassium and the phosphorus will be important, because it's going to help that rhizome grow well for you. Okay. Next. We have a question about, will the ginger go crazy like bamboo does? Bamboo grows from rhizomes, and it can be very invasive if it's grown outside, because those rhizomes just keep on going, and they proliferate quickly. My experience with ginger hasn't been that it's invasive like that, but I imagine it could be, if you let it go outside. I actually have a ginger plant right behind me. If you can see it. Yeah, this is my ginger plant right here. It's about 30 inches high. It's about 10 months old. And I have it in a 30-inch wide container. And I started it about 10 months ago, just from about 5 pieces of rhizome. Okay. So we're going to let it grow. We're going to keep it moist. We're going to fertilize it monthly. If it's outside, I'm not going to have it in direct sunlight. I'm not going to have it in southern sunlight, especially in the summer, because that's scorching hot, and the leaves will really get burnt, and it'll be stressful for the plant. So in our environment here, when we're in the winter time, it would probably be able to grow in a southern exposure or western exposure just fine. But as the sun starts getting really hot in the late spring, you're going to want to move it so that's, again, not in the really, really intense heat of the later part of the day. Good morning sun, and also it can use that dappled light. And it's going to tell you if it's happy by the way it looks. It's going to be growing well if it's happy. and it's not going to have burnt leaves. Okay, let's see. I'm trying to read my own notes here. I have not done this. I am going to try it though, because I have my 10-month-old ginger behind me and I'm going to harvest it next month. I am going to keep a third of it still in the pot and mark it with a tag so I know, and then I'll come back the following year and harvest some of it and see what I think of it as far as intensity. So I've heard that it gets more intense with age, but I haven't experienced it. So that's kind of a growing thing for me to find out. It also does get fibrous though. Just an aside, the leaves can be used for tea. And the leaves also are kind of nice to munch on. I tried that the other day. They have a little bit of a stringiness to them, but they taste really good. They taste like a very mild ginger. The strings kind of remind me of what you have in celery sometimes. But so you can use them to garnish a plate. You could chop it up and just add it to something, and it's mild. So it's kind of fun to know there are different ways you can use things, especially if you're growing your ginger indoors. You're not going to have to wait the 10 months to have a little taste of it. I think the idea of ginger tea is really, really nice.
We have a few questions.
Sure.
Someone asked, does the plant have flowers?
It does have flowers. Mine has not flowered. I really haven't taken time to find out why, but it does, and it's a pretty flower.
And then another question was, I think the person had planted what they thought was ginger, and it was white and not yellow. So was that turmeric?
I don't know. There are different types of ginger, and there are different types of turmeric. So I don't know the answer to that. I think if you want to know what it is, well, you don't want to be tasting things you don't know what they are at all. But if you knew it was one of those two things, I would taste it. It's going to be your best bet to find out what it is, or taste the leaves. We already know that the ginger leaves have a distinct ginger flavor. I don't know about turmeric. I haven't tasted the leaves. I would think they do, but I don't know.
And then another question was, when do you use the leaves as it's growing? Does that hurt the production of the ginger?
Not at all. No. They're hardy, and they'll give a little. I mean, they would be giving a little to insects or to animals brushing by or breaking off a section. No, I just you'd want to think about it. You wouldn't want to denude the plant. I wouldn't take any more than maybe 10% of the leaves off at one time. And then after they're replaced, I might think about doing that again. And that's kind of a guideline for a lot of plants. You can take a portion and you still leave them enough leaves that can do the work of feeding itself, by making the starches and the new growth that it needs.
Yeah. And then one last question. This is kind of our favorite topic. Can they use worm castings for the fertilizer?
I like that question. Certainly you can. Yeah. That's my favorite thing are worms. I'm a worm freak. Definitely use worm castings. And I think you could also use worm castings when you're planting it, because it's a very, very mild fertilizer. It doesn't burn it, and it's a good source. So I think that's a good idea. Yeah. So harvesting is kind of out here. You're going to dig up all or a portion of the rhizome. It's a pretty tough plant. So if you're going to leave part of it in, like I'm going to leave the one behind me, I'm going to leave a fourth of it in the ground. So I'm just going to carefully, dig it up, cut it off with a knife, or break it off with my hands. And then I'm just going to get the soil off of it, wash it. And then the task is just, am I going to eat it all quickly, within a week or so? Or am I going to preserve it in some way? And so that would be the choice that you have. I see a good question about how deep will the roots grow in the ground. I don't know the answer to that. The rhizome stays pretty much about 6 inches down. The roots, I don't know. I would think that they would go down quite a ways, but I don't know for sure. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so to preserve ginger, freezing is recommended, and you can take unpeeled pieces. That's suggested in the reading that I did. I think it just helps it keep its flavor. And you could cut it into chunks and put it on a tray, like a cookie tray, and put it in the freezer, let them freeze, in a couple hours, and then bag them up nicely, in a good freezer bag. You can dehydrate them and have ginger chips. I'm going to try dehydrating mine and making my own ginger powder. I'm really curious to know what it's going to be like for ginger snaps and for baking. I like to use it in baking. And you can pickle it, which is easy to do, either with salt or with vinegar. And I looked up a couple recipes. They're just like no-brainers. It's something you probably already have in your kitchen. It's got 2 or 3 ingredients, and probably would take you 15 minutes to put it together and to slice or shave your ginger and preserve it that way. Fermentation, I have not tried that yet, and there's some great recipes, and it's really simple. Just taking grated ginger, you're using the microorganisms that are in your environment, which I love, and then you have water, and then you of course things are sterile when you start, but essentially what you're going to have is those microorganisms are going to start a fermentation process with that ginger, and you get a ginger type carbonated drink. And I love ginger. So this is my new adventure. I don't know how it's going to turn out, but it looks so simple that I've got to try it and see where it goes. Okay. Oh, we were going to leave this slide out. I am going to ask a couple questions though. It's kind of fun to think about this. And I hadn't really considered it until I got ready to do this talk with you. But is ginger an herb or a spice? You can put it in the chat. And if it's an herb, why? And if it's a spice, why? A little semantic question. Louise thinks it's an herb. I hate to tell you, Louise. It's a spice. Yeah. Mary's just saying it's a spice because you don't eat the leaves. So that was new to me. An herb is the foliage and other things, the bark, the rhizome, seeds are spices. So just something to make you smarter than the next person when that topic comes up. Okay. And I have to throw this in here about the last point, because I personally have so much fun with my plants, and I have had a lot of fun sharing them with people. And I think with the holidays coming up, you can get a piece of ginger and you can break it into pieces. You can take a nice pot, you can put some good soil in there, amend it with our perlite, a little bit of compost, put it in there. You could get it going. You'll have some shoots in about 3 weeks if you did it this weekend. And by Thanksgiving, a couple weeks before Thanksgiving, you'd have some leaves on it, and you'd have a beautiful gift to give somebody as a hostess gift, or just a fun gift, or it's a good talking point. We're all interested in food. And I like the way it just brings that, it's something that everybody can talk about. And other people you'll find have had maybe a lot of experience growing ginger, or their grandma used to grow it, or, you'll learn things. And it's just inexpensive, and it's easy, and it's very simple. It's also a very beautiful plant. And I have a picture of it in the slides, but this one, it has kind of an architectural look to it. It's angular, and it looks really nice against a white wall. I've just got cardboard behind it so you can see it. But it's a nice looking plant. And when it's in a pot by itself, something like this, it comes up about 18 inches and has a couple of elegant leaves that come out in the beginning before it gets a lot of foliage on it. And it just has a very simple look to it, kind of like an iris, not an iris, but an orchid does. It's very pretty. What didn't show on the screen earlier? Mary says something didn't show on the screen earlier.
It appears that the slides aren't showing any of the pictures, unfortunately.
Oh, bummer. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. Thank you. I'm sorry. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Okay, so that's ginger. It's wonderful. You can plant it easily and you're good to go. We've got chives, and it's also in the onion family, the allium family. So garlic, chives, onions, leeks, and actually elephant garlic isn't really garlic, it's really in the leek family, but these guys are all related to one another. So your chives, we're just eating the foliage, and it's yummy. I don't have a chive plant growing right now, so I went down to my Asian market today and I bought a nice clump of fresh chives. And this is the way they grow outdoors. You'll probably have a clump from a chive plant that's about 12 inches across and maybe 20 inches high. And these clumps will get wider and wider. When you harvest them, a good way to harvest them is kind of what we were when we were talking about the ginger plant, is to not cut off the top of it, but just to go around the plant with scissors and just cut in about, take a clump and cut in. And then move on to the next section, take a clump and cut in. So you're making the clump smaller in diameter when you're cutting it, but you're leaving the height. So it's just a way to not take too much off. You still got the plant looking pretty good when you do it that way, instead of hacking off a section like this or cutting across the top. It's a preference. It's not a have to, but that's the way to do it. And that's called cut and come. When you do that, it's taking a portion of the plant, not taking too much, so that the plant still has enough energy to keep itself going and keep itself healthy, but you have some that it can share with you. And so it works out really well that way. Okay. It's a really great pollinator. It has beautiful little lavender puffy flowers, about as big as a little cotton ball. And so it's pretty, and it's also good for your garden to attract beneficial insects. There's also garlic chives, and they just have a slight garlic flavor. And they have little white flowers that are much the same, like a cotton ball. And they have a lot of nice movement in the wind. So they're pretty in the garden. And so it's something that is both attractive and it's edible. The only thing, keep in mind that you can eat the flowers. And so that's a fun thing to use as a garnish, but better yet, to put it in a dish and have somebody ask you, what is that thing anyway? And you can let them know that it's a chive flower and they're fully edible. I just suggest that you kind of make up your mind about your chive flowers, because if you let them go to seed, they will disperse many, many seeds, and you'll have chives all over the place, and you'll probably have a lot more than you want. And then to produce seeds takes energy from the plant also. So if you want some seeds, great, let some of them go to seed and you can save them or plant them. But eating the flowers is great, and just enjoying them for their beauty and for the benefit of the garden is also a real plus. You can divide them in the fall. This would be the time to do it if you had a clump of chives in your yard. And they're going to be about, 12 inches wide, about 20 inches high. You just take a shovel and just break off a good section of it, maybe a third or a half of it, and carefully take that root ball, put your shovel underneath it, and move it to another location or put it into a pot to gift it to somebody. It's pretty hardy, and you're going to keep it moist. After you have divided it, I would water the plant that you took it from, and I would also water the pot that you put it in, and I kind of put it in a protected place for a week or two. A little traumatized, some of the roots have broken off. So It's not going to be in full sun. Put it maybe in some light shade so it can recover.
So we had
Okay.
a question, Dee,
Yeah.
on can you eat, I think it's society garlic like chives? I've never heard of it.
I'm sorry. I'm not getting the question.
Society garlic.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I have to look that up. Um, I don't know the answer to that. I know that, okay, I know it's edible. Whether it's considered a culinary chive in the sense that it's good, I don't know that. Yeah. I have had some garlic chives that I didn't like. They were really sharp. So I can't really answer that. I have to look that up. The society chive is a common name, and I don't know if actually it's related to chives, but it's kind of a different variety. I don't know. So I have to pass on that question. That should be pretty easy to find the answer though.
And then a question, are you growing the chives from seed?
I've I have grown some from seed, yeah, and they proliferate pretty well. Yeah, so you can buy them in the nurseries, or you can as seedlings, or you can grow them from seed. You would have started growing them probably about 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago, though, so you'd have them ready to put out in the fall. An interesting note about chives is, and I know that dehydrated chives are sold in the store, but they actually don't have nearly as much flavor as if you freeze them. So if you grow your own and just chop them up and put them in some small bags and freeze them, it's going to be more tasty, and you're going to certainly have enough nice supply of chives rather than dehydrating them yourself or buying dehydrated ones. Okay, so someone's giving us a definition of the society garlic, and it's really just it's clumpy, and it's about the same size as what we're talking about. But I don't know if they're different varieties. I'm imagining there would be, but I don't know.
And then just a real quick question on the ginger again. They're just wondering, do you plant it 6 inches down or 1 to 2 inches?
I put it about 2 to 4 inches down. Yeah, 2 to 4 inches down. You could probably put it 6 also, and it'd be fine. Yeah. Okay. Shall we move on? Okay. Okay, here's an answer. And I think this kind of resonates. Society garlic is considered an ornamental. We've had somebody answer that for us. So I'm thinking it's just, when I tasted it, I didn't like it. It tasted kind of bitter. So that's what makes me think it's really not a culinary herb. Okay. So, oh, we've got a typo. Turmeric, turmeric. So, and it's look, we did correct something, but I guess that we got ourselves mixed up in correcting, so excuse us. So, with the turmeric, it's a rhizome. It's much like ginger in appearance. It has kind of a goldeny color, kind of red little stripes on it or ribs. But you can plant it indoors in the winter, and you can put 2 to 4. You can take it and have 2 to 4 of them in a pot, and you want them to have buds on them, just like with the ginger, because the bud is where the sprout is going to form and come up. And you can buy that in the grocery store also. And there are many different varieties. I don't know if just the run-of-the-mill grocery store is going to just carry one variety. I'm guessing that maybe some of the markets, Indian markets or the Asian markets, like I went to today for the chives, might have some different varieties that you might want to try. But turmeric likes full sun. It's a real hardy grower. You can grow it actually in the soil if you like, but since it is a rhizome, you don't want it getting away from you. Um, but if you're going to harvest it every year, then most likely it's not going to do that. It does get to be about 4 or 4.5 feet high with some pretty dense foliage, kind of tropical looking foliage. And it has some really pretty tropical looking flowers, kind of like a small, uh, kind of fleshy, like an orchid, that kind of um, um, quality about it. So it's a pretty plant. Um, Again, just like the ginger, if you're going to plant it inside in a pot, you're going to need a pot you're probably going to start it small. Start some pieces that are small in a small pot. And then when it starts to sprout, then you can go ahead and transplant it into a larger container. It's a little bit harder grower than the ginger, so you're going to have it in a bigger pot, probably at least a 12 or 16-inch pot, and maybe that much in diameter also. So you can grow the turmeric, which looks like ginger. You can grow it in a small pot. Just pick off a piece like this. You could snap a piece off, and you could put it in a pot about this size. You know, you can put it down there about 2 inches and cover it with your soil. Again, I use a soil that has the perlite in it, so we have good drainage. And then when it's covered and you've moistened it, you can put the old plastic bag over it. And this likes to be warmer than the ginger in order to stimulate the sprouting. So you can put it on a heating pad. There's heating pads, heating mats designed for plants, and you can put it on that. You can also put it on your own heating pad, and maybe you'd like to put some towels over it or whatnot, and keep checking the temperature with the thermometer so you know what the temperature is. Some people will put it on top of a water heater, but you're going to have to do a little bit of investigating and monitoring to find out what that temperature is. So if you're thinking about your water heater, you can just put a thermometer out there and see what it registers. So it likes to be pretty warm, about 85 degrees. And then when it starts to sprout, then you can take the temperature down a bit and take your plastic off. But you're just applying humidity with the plastic. Yeah.
Just to clarify, where would they get it?
At the grocery store.
Okay.
Oftentimes, yeah, oftentimes it's there right with your ginger. Mhm.
And then with regards to the potting mix, um, similar to the ginger, you would add the perlite.
I would add it for the drainage because yeah, that can be your problem because you've got this rhizome and we don't want it to be sitting in water so that some pathogens are going to start to grow and attack it. So we want it to be moist, but we want the water to be like pulled away from it, not to be sitting and being pulled around it. So I think if you have the perlite in there, it's kind of like your insurance policy. It helps. And you can also stick your finger in there and feel, go down about 2 or 3 inches and feel, is that moist? You don't want to have it just looking moist on the top and have it dry inside. And just an aside about that, with your potting soils, always keep them sealed up so that the moisture is retained in them. It's difficult to rehydrate a soil. It can look like it's okay, but it's really not. You'll have some dry patches that you really can't see, and the plant's going to pick up on that. So if you just keep it sealed up like you would food, you wouldn't have a bag of something opened, that has moisture in it. So you just want to be sure it's just a good practice to keep the moisture in the bag. Yes, you can plant your turmeric outside, and this would be your time of year to do it if you like, because we're in a temperate area, or you can wait until the spring. But I think if you want to plant it, I would probably start it indoors, and maybe in early spring, then put it outdoors. And it'd be a pretty good house plant. It's not going to be gigantic. It's when it gets into the heat and in the larger space that it's going to really start producing. Okay, so I'm sure that's not exhaustive, but you know, this isn't scientific, but this is the way I think about it. The plant wants to live. And so it has, just like we don't always have the best diet or the right amount of sleep, but you know, we can muddle through. So do the best you can with the plants. And we have resources as master gardeners. You can ask questions, and Jill's going to post some of those. We have a helpline. And then there is some information, especially about the ginger on our website. And just keeping in mind that the turmeric is much the same. It just needs more heat to sprout. That can be helpful to you. Okay. All right. So let's move on. Okay. So harvesting for the turmeric is going to be kind of like the ginger, about 10 months after you plant. And it's going to give you a signal that's much more definitive than the ginger. The ginger will kind of keep on going for a longer period of time. But the turmeric will get kind of brown leaves, will kind of die back a little bit. It'll look like it's not doing too well. So it's kind of, it senses it's at the end of its life cycle. It's ready for harvest after about those 10 months. And so you're just going to like dump it out of the pot that it's in, or you're going to take a shovel or a turning fork, whatever you have on hand, and carefully just kind of dig in there and pull it up. And then you'll have this massive rhizomes with a lot of soil. You'll have roots coming off, and you'll have the foliage coming out the top, the sprouts. So if you cut those off about an inch above, and then cut off the roots off the bottom and wash it, and then you can figure out what you want to do with it. Am I going to dehydrate it and grind it up? Am I going to pickle it? Am I going to freeze it? It can be refrigerated for quite a while in a damp towel. The only thing I would say about that is a damp paper towel is not going to cut it. A nice terry towel that's damp and that you check every 1 to 2 days, that works. But it's going to dry out with the paper towel. It's just, it's not thick enough. And it can keep up to about 8 months that way if you're really careful with it. Okay, let's have another slide. Okay, so let's go back to garlic. And garlic is, who doesn't like garlic? I don't think I know anybody who doesn't like garlic. It's fun to grow garlic because it's different looking. And when you find out you can grow it and it's not a big deal, I don't know, I have a sense that I've done something. So the plant dates for garlic are right about now until the end of November. And then it likes to have loose, loamy soil, and it likes to have compost. So we need to have a rich soil. So an addition of compost is going to be important for it. It likes the sun, and it likes to be continuously moist, but not wet. It doesn't want to, and we're thinking about that bulb. We don't want it sitting in water, okay? And if we have rains, like we usually have in this area when we don't have our freaky weather, oftentimes you don't have to water it all in the winter, but it needs to be moist. So just keep an eye on it. If you're planting it next week, have it moist when you plant it. Check it every couple days, keep it moist. And if we get rain, then it's fine. And if you have soil that is kind of loose, then you're going to find that, you know, it's not going to get all waterlogged. And yes, you can grow it in containers. And it's best to have it about 6 inches apart. So you have to have a pretty big pot, maybe something like this, like 2 feet across. And you don't have to plant it that deep, but they have to be 6 inches apart in order to have enough nutrients in there to support those plants. If you're planting them outside, you're going to plant the rows about 1 foot apart and the plants again about 6 inches apart. This is what helps me, because I was very confused about garlic until somebody told me this. So you plant it around Halloween, okay? So we're in October tomorrow, so we can call that Halloween, but around Halloween. We fertilize it around St. Patrick's Day in the spring. And on Mother's Day, you stop watering it, and that's really important. And on Father's Day, you harvest it. And the whole thing with the watering is, so if you have your garlic in an irrigated bed, you need to be sure that you're able to turn the irrigation off for that month so that it's not going to be watered. Okay.
And then we have a quick question. Can they use store-bought garlic?
Yes. Sometimes they put inhibitors on it, but again, you can buy organic garlic. You'd be sure they don't have the inhibitor on it. But I have planted some from the store and it's worked out. But to go through that bother, I guess what you want to do is get the organic garlic, or you can buy garlic from seed companies. Just like you can buy potatoes, seed potatoes, you can buy garlic. I hope that answers your question. So I would go first of all with organic garlic, and then I would go purchasing it. I don't know how the stores are stocked right now with that kind of thing, but you could go online and see if you can get some garlic. Okay, somebody says they just paid $18 for a single large head of seed garlic. Wow. Wow. That you're going to have to grow that and then sell those. And someone else says that Baker Seeds is a good place to get garlic. And then there is also some information on our website. I'd like to show you a couple of garlics here. Can we go into the next slide? Yeah. There are two categories of garlic. There's soft neck and hard neck, and what's also called stiff neck. So the soft neck basically just looks like an artichoke. It's kind of hard to peel. The papery stuff kind of sticks to it. It's kind of stuck together, bunched together, okay? And that's what you usually find in the grocery stores. And some of the common ones are the Chapka Mountain, the early Italian, and the Inchililium Red, which I just think is really fun. I love that name. And they come from Central Asia, and then they've spread throughout the rest of the world with people really, different cultures, just really loving garlic and doing wonderful things with them. Like a lot like peppers, they run from mild to like blow your head off. And one of them is very rare. I think it's called Jeffrey's garlic. So get to know people who are growing garlic. And then someone mentioned how a head of garlic, seed garlic that was purchased was expensive. You may want to go into that with somebody else. Maybe you can buy some garlic and then trade. But also remember, we're going to be going through when you harvest your garlic, you can save some of it and use that to grow for the following season. And then you're going to be completely autonomous. You won't be buying garlic from other places. You can just use some of your garlic, and then you can save the good stuff to plant in the fall. Okay, and somebody says that TJ's has organic garlic and ginger, and that they planted the ginger and it grew buds. So good for TJ's. I like that. Just to give you an idea about the sizes, this is the Inchililium Red, and you can see in my hand here the size of it. It's a pretty big one. And this is a soft neck. We have the early Italian, which is the one I think we're all familiar with. This is the one that we see most often in the store. It's kind of a small one, like a golf ball. This is a Russian Giant, which is a hard neck, and it's said to be hot and very, very spicy. So I'm trying this one this year. And then we have what's called the Korean Mountain. And this one in capital letters is said to be very hot. So I'm going to be trying this one also. We have a Russian Giant, which is hot and spicy. And then there's this Chapaka Mountain, which is a soft neck. And it's just kind of a medium garlic. Garlics, like many things, like roses, like irises, you can start getting into it and it just keeps going on forever. They're just there's the hot, there's mellow, there's mild. Um, there's rare. So it's a fun thing. And if you're just follow the directions and follow the good gardening guidelines, you'll have some garlic, and then you'll be able to save some also, so you can reproduce the following year. And that's kind of a neat thing, especially if you come across one that you really like, then you'll be able to even share it or trade it with other people. That's a fun thing to do. Okay, let's go back to the slides. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Okay, we're going to talk about how we preserve it, cure it and preserve it at the end. The thing that's kind of is funny to me, the hard neck or the stiff neck, and I have not grown this type. I'm going to be growing it this year. So this is why I'm not all that familiar with it. I've read about it. I've seen pictures of it, but I haven't done it myself. Scapes are a shoot that comes out of the center of the garlic while it's growing. And it's a tender green shoot. Its purpose is it's a reproductive element. It's going to come out and have a little bud, and then it's going to grow what are called bulbuses, which look like little teeny weeny seeds. They're round, and they're actually, when they fall to the ground, when they're released, they're going to actually fall to the ground and grow into a garlic plant, but they grow slowly. So it's going to take them about 3 years before they have a nice big bulb that you can eat. So that's the way the hardnecks will reproduce themselves in nature. Okay. The thing about the scape, if it comes up, is you want to, it may look something like this, like the chive, when it starts coming up, and you're going to have your garlic, and you're going to have this big thing coming up where maybe the other parts of the garlic plant are only half as tall. Oftentimes they come up and they start curling around in these really exotic ways, and they're really pretty. And then they'll have a little bud at the end, and you'll see that something's forming in there. The scapes are edible, and they have a nice mild garlic flavor. So 2 things you want to think about with scapes. Look for them. When you see them, cut them off at the base, because they're sapping energy from the plant. They're making these bulbuses, but the bulbuses are only going to drop to the ground, and they're taking energy from the plant itself, and it's going to take them 3 years to get established and give you any garlic cloves. And in the meantime, they're taking quite a bit of energy from that plant, and the cloves that are growing for you that you're going to harvest in the late spring may be a lot smaller and fewer than if you had not let that scape grow. So the deal is, look at your garlic. You're going to be checking it for moisture anyhow, checking it for weeds and removing them. But if the scape starts to grow, and it's going to be very distinctive, it's going to be weird. It's going to be like much taller than any of the other leaves. Just cut it off very, very soon, and then use it, eat it. It's going to be yummy. So chop it up or stir fry it, and you can eat the bulb also. But the longer you let it go, the more energy it's going to take from your plant, and the more fibrous and woody it's going to become. And then it's just going to be something you want to throw away or compost. It's not going to be edible, and it hasn't been able to make the bulbuses anyhow. So it's a loss. So just keep a look at it. And if it's a hard neck, you're going to know that you're going to have a scape. And there are all kinds of recipes for scapes, and it looks like a green spaghetti sometimes. It's like a delicacy. Some people will purposely grow the hard necks so they can have the scapes. And so they just have something interesting that you don't run into too often. Okay, so we can go on to our next slide. These were just some of them. The Julius Star, that's the one that says it has a rich flavor and it's a rare variety. So ask people, what kind of garlic you got? You want to trade? It's kind of like baseball cards. You can kind of get into it, and it's fun. Okay. And then we have those listed on our website too. So when you plant it, you're just going to use plump, healthy cloves only. You're not going to use something that looks rotten or soft because that means it's degraded, it's not healthy. And you're going to take it and just break it into individual cloves. And I think we've probably, every one of us has done this when we're cooking. You know, you're going to break it into the individual clove. This was something I did not know the first year that I planted my garlic. The paper has a purpose. It's there because it's a protective element for the garlic. Leave it on. And we've got the section on the bottom that's kind of flat. And then we've got the pointy stuff on the top. Okay, here's our pointy stuff. And then here's our flat on the bottom. So it's flat side down, it's pointy side up. Okay, so it's pointing up. It wants to go up. You're going to point it up. And we can just take our soil and we're going to have them 6 inches apart. We're going to have it 2 inches into the soil. Okay. And whether it be in a pot or whether it be outside, it's going to be moist. Okay. And there you go. Now this soil is moist, but I would still need to moisten it. So I have a little bit of drainage out the bottom. Okay. And this is something that you could give somebody as a gift also, or a grandchild as something interesting for them to grow the garlic. Okay. I've lost my PowerPoint. Okay. So it's pointy side up, flat side down. You put about 1 inch or 2 beneath the soil. And it's important that you stop your irrigation in May around Mother's Day. Like that's all you've got to think about on Mother's Day is don't water that garlic anymore. So you're going to harvest it. We'll go to the next slide. Okay. Okay. All right. Oh, this is something interesting. I forgot about this. When you're planting the garlic cloves, like I have this big head, and I've got some nice big ones in here. I think you've all seen this. And then towards the center, I have some little teeny weeny baby ones. They're about 1/3 or 1/4 the size of the other cloves. So they're kind of the runts of the litter. And what you can do with those is plant them about just 2 inches apart and in a group together, just 2 inches apart. And then you can grow them just to use the greens. So in the springtime, you can harvest the greens. That's called spring garlic. And you're not going to have a big bulb that's formed because it wasn't really, it was a puny one. It didn't have a lot of energy in that bulb. So, but you've got something yummy. You're going to have the leaves and you can just chop them up. They're nice and tender. Eat them raw or you can cook with them. But you don't have to throw them out and waste them. They're viable. They're just not particularly strong or big. So use your puny ones. Okay. So we're all concerned about the harvest. The harvest is pretty easy. It needs to have about a month of no water. So that's why when we stop watering on Mother's Day, and you may even notice about that time, it's reaching the end of its life cycle where it's putting its energy into the bulb. So you're going to see that there'll be a little bit of browning. Maybe a couple of the leaves will die back a little bit. That's fine. That's what's supposed to happen. And that's kind of telling you that it's changing gears and it's putting a lot of its energy not into the foliage anymore, but it's putting it into developing a nice big clove for you. So let it develop for about those 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And if you do the Mom's Day, Father's Day thing, that's going to work out to be about a month. So just leave it there. And then you're going to be watching the stems. And the stems are going to tell you what the plant is doing. And the browner the stems get, it means more energy is going into the bulbs. So when they're about half or more brown, then that's a good time to harvest them because most of the work has been done and it's ready. You're ready to eat them now. You're ready to harvest them and cure them, and then you can eat them. So the next slide just has a little bit about that. You can take it straight out of the ground, wash it up, and eat it raw or cook it. For storing it, you're going to brush off the soil, and gently is the word. And I read somewhere, to think of it as being like a fruit that bruises easily, like a pear or something like that, or an apple. Don't be rough with it, because it is living. And if we bruise it, it's going to break the skin and it's going to make it able for pathogens to get in there, and then it will rot and not be edible. You've got these all laying out in the ground. You can take a fork or you can take a shovel and kind of pick them up and put them on top of the soil. And then you can just collect them by their dried portions and cut them off about 8 inches. So you have something to hold on to. You can tie a string around them in groups of 4 or 5. You can hang them on a rack. This wouldn't be in direct sun. And they need to have some good air circulation because they're going to kind of thoroughly dry out. So you could have a fan on them. You could have them in a area of your yard, maybe under a tree that gets some good breezes and isn't in direct sunlight. But mold is going to grow where there's moisture. So we're just trying to get that excess moisture out of there. Okay. And then this is what's interesting. If we just go back for a minute, to store it in a mesh bag, and you can keep those plastic mesh bags, or you can have a cotton mesh bag if you own one, or paper bags. But the garlic needs to be stored at a temperature that's cooler than what we have in our houses. So it will store really well up to like 8 months if you have it at the right temperature and if it thoroughly dried out for those 2 to 3 weeks with good air circulation. So you can find, if you can find an area in your house that's usually cooler, whether it's a closet or I don't know where it might be. We all have different situations, but storing it in the kitchen, in the pantry, is probably not going to give you your 8 months. Yeah. So you want to try to find a nice place to keep it where it's cooler. Okay. Well, I've talked an awful lot. Here are some wonderful resources that Jill has. You know, it's interesting is about the refrigerator. Someone's asking if you can use the refrigerator to store it. That's an interesting question. I think a refrigerator is probably too cold. I'm thinking a wine cooler might be the right temperature, but then you've got moisture in there. So I think that's a problem. The dry cool is what we're looking for. It would be the old days when people had cellars. Sometimes you have a garage or a storage shed, depending on where it's located and how it's insulated, that might be cool. So it might be a hard thing to find. Okay, somebody said they have stored it in the fridge, but as soon as it gets warm, it starts to sprout. Yeah.
Dee, is there a difference in the storage of soft and hard neck garlic?
Oh, that's a good question. The soft neck has, you can keep the stalks, you know, they start to dry out and then you harvest them. You can braid those together. And the hard necks are just a little bit more difficult to braid, although I have heard people say that they can braid them. So you can do that if you want to. But if you have that 8 inches and tie a string around it, you know, with 3 or 4 bulbs, depending on their size and everything, and hang them over a rack or hang them off a hanger or something where they get good air circulation, that should work. I have to tell you honestly that we have a whole group of gardeners in our chapter who are garlic gurus, and they raise all different types and they know a lot more than I do about it. They're just garlic geeks. So I think you could contact them with more information through our helpline, most likely. Yeah. Oh, somebody says that they planted turmeric for the first time this year and they're waiting to harvest it. Love to hear how that goes. I'd really appreciate it if you could let us know. That'd be wonderful. Are there any other questions or comments? Thank you. Deborah says she's going to let us know. So What's the best way to have her do that?
Probably send it to the help desk.
Yeah,
Mhm.
please do that. We would love that feedback, or any other feedback that you have from this presentation or something from your own experience would be, we really value that. Yeah, thank you.
All right, that's it. Thank you all,
Oh,
and it will be posted to our YouTube channel.
so go and grow and give your friends and family some of that ginger and turmeric. They want it.